What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I wanted to just talk about ignoring the warning signs or ignoring fear. When we use the word fear, I think there are obviously certain things in the scriptures that tell us that we should not fear, or we should not be cowards, or we should not be afraid of godless people, or there are certain cases where God is asking us to stand up in fearful situations. But one thing I want to consider is I guess you could say it as ignoring the warning signs of different things, because I think obviously there are people who do realize this sometimes, but there are a lot of people who don't necessarily, take certain things as a warning to at least, if you are going to proceed, to use extreme caution in certain cases. And I think a lot of people, ignore certain warning signs, which I think can, come across in different forms, and I kind of want to talk about a little bit about that, and then also, of course, tie this into God, and kind of a biblical outlook on this. And so the first part, I think, is a little bit of a kind of a natural look towards the world, where I think there are certain cases where certain things give us a warning in regards to hey, this situation could be potentially dangerous. For example, when you look at the ocean, and going to the depths of the ocean, you sort of realize, especially with maybe something as simple as the absence of light. I think those are, the obvious kind of warning signs sometimes that, maybe this part of the world is not to be, entered into, or obviously, it really can't easily be entered into, which I think is obviously another warning sign. But, there are certain things that, we have to look at when, talking about maybe going down to maybe the bottom of the ocean, and researching. And I think I thought of this when thinking of the tragedy of the Ocean Gate submarine, where they were trying to go view the Titanic, and it seems like, I think they had obviously a level of caution as far as understanding that it's a dangerous place. But I think from the outsiders looking in, even though we don't know all the details, it seems like some of the caution signs weren't necessarily heeded to the level that they should be. And so I think there are other scenarios too. I mean, when you look at some at least as simply as the faces of some animals, or just the demeanor of some animals, okay, this is an animal that I should use caution towards, and I shouldn't necessarily maybe just run up to this animal, or try to get really close to this animal without any proper protection. And this seems like an obvious thing, but yet I think there are numerous cases that show how people kind of blow caution to the wind, and they encounter some of these animals, and it becomes a dangerous situation. For example, I just saw on the news a person, it was a woman that was trying to get a selfie picture, and she stood really, really close to a bison, and what we have discovered about bison is that they are actually, pretty dangerous animals. That they can trample you, or they can catch you off guard really easily, and trample you and basically kill you. And this has actually happened a few times. And so I think there are different scenarios that we could keep bringing up. And one of the other scenarios would be, space travel. I think one of the obvious things is that, sometimes when you look at, the environment of space, you can tell, like, wow, space, this is a, very dangerous environment. And, if we go into space, we should use extreme caution. And I think are certain scenarios that suggest, hey, we shouldn't even really go too far into this area, because it poses great danger. And so I think that obviously there are certain scenarios where you do have to sort of explore. There's human curiosity in some ways, and obviously there are, certain scenarios where you can't necessarily avoid a dangerous situation. But I just wanted to kind of throw up a reminder about how, we sometimes take lightly certain dangers that are, around us, and we don't necessarily take precaution in certain scenarios. I was sort of kind of warning another Christian brother where he was going to evangelize in this, part of the world that was very dangerous. He was going to a nation, the nation of Haiti. And so one of the things I was telling him was like, hey, you shouldn't really go to this area because, this area is extremely dangerous. But, one thing that I realized was that, he had felt a call from God to, go out to Haiti in order to, either minister to them through maybe evangelism. He's basically a street preacher. And so he was going to street preach a little bit, but also, just distribute food and things like that. And so I think that's kind of an example of, how there are sometimes certain situations where, we are, maybe in a situation where it's kind of unavoidable, especially for, a Christian who feels called to, preach in, certain areas of the world. And so, but I think, one of the things that he pointed out was this. He was kind of saying the same thing of how, if you are not necessarily a professional, one of the things that he realized was that, this nation, is very dangerous. And, he realized how, in certain cases, he did feel as if he was in danger. But thankfully, he made it back. And, still, I think, when I was looking at the news while he was out there, it was a few people that actually got kidnapped, over in that area in Haiti, and while he was over there. And so, I think in that particular situation, obviously, it's kind of a personal choice as far as, ignoring the warning signs. But I think one of the things I don't think I finished this thought that I was mentioning, but one of the things that he mentioned was how if you're not a professional, if you're not, an experienced person to go out into these areas, he was recommending, hey, don't come to Haiti, and he was actually making that statement of how, he realized that he was even telling other Christian ministries Like, if you're not prepared for this type of evangelism, he says, hey, don't even come out here, because, what he saw out there was so, eye opening, and so, kind of, I think one of the phrases that he sort of used was unspeakable, as far as, the craziness of what's happening over there. And then I think he also mentioned how, there was a definite need of humanitarian aid and different things like that, not necessarily only speaking about the dangers, but also just how, people are in so much need over there. And so anyway, I think that is a good place to transition into, talking about God. I think so many people in this world, operate in such a way of, hey, there is no God, or, what their thoughts about God are sort of false, in that they think, oh, because God is good, then, hey, I'm not necessarily in any danger, and, I can, do whatever I feel like doing, as, and especially in regards to sin. And so I think there are so many people who sort of, I think, are born and then they grow up in this life, and, they never, kind of take heed to some of the warning signs that I think God has just placed naturally in this world. And they start, making all these assumptions about this place. And we have such a lack of knowledge as far as some of the things that we understand about how, this place, operates. Of course, there's so many areas that, we could sort of make up, our own thoughts about how certain things operate. But sticking to how, there are certain things that God tells us about, his own character, and that he does judge sin and he does judge wrongdoing. And I think, there are so many people, as we know, who, kind of, throw out caution, towards certain things. And, they don't necessarily realize that, they are like birds in a trap, so to speak. And, that's what the book of Proverbs says, is that, especially for someone who maybe takes someone else's life, you're really trapping your own self in a bad situation, because, God does deal with sin. Now, obviously, all people have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so, I think that there are certain cases where God gives us time to come out of sin and darkness and different things like that, and not necessarily dealing with us according to, our sins. But, we see so many things that I think this message is sort of needed, especially in 2024, because, when you see the development of some of these new technologies and new endeavors that are trying to be accomplished, you see that, there is a real godlessness about it, where, you're not even taking into account or even acknowledging God as, hey, should I, do this thing that I'm looking to do? For example, when you think about some of the natural things that are in place in this world, I'm all for space travel and whatnot, but sometimes we should maybe even ask ourselves, does God even want us to, set up a civilization on Mars or set up a civilization on the moon? And obviously, I don't know if it's so clear for someone to really find out that answer. Of course, obviously, there are people who are going to do what they want to do and see how far they can go. without God intervening. But you know, it it becomes obvious in some cases when you see that, there's no water on these other planets. There's no easy way to get there, to, space and to the moon. And so, I feel like there's a whole, kind of uh, conversation that we could have even just on space alone. But feel like there's so many different things that, we have to at least, acknowledge God and say, hey, God, is this something that I should do? Rather than taking the position of, hey, I'm just going to do whatever I feel like doing. And, it's almost like, I think there's a saying out there, like, if God wanted to stop me, he would, type of thing. And, I've heard a few people kind of, well, at least maybe in a movie or something where they say like, hey, if God wanted to strike me dead, he'd do it, type of thing. And so, obviously, I don't know if we could always, know every dangerous or, situation or environment that we may be in that may be dangerous, because there are just many things that, the Word of God does not necessarily reveal, or there's different things that, we just don't know. Especially, when you talk about maybe, sickness and disease, we sort of figured out a lot of stuff like, hey, if we don't wash our hands, it's easier to get, sick or have germs and stuff like that. And so, I've heard of a scenario where, a surgeon was, performing all these different surgeries, and he wasn't necessarily washing his surgical tools after each surgery. And so he was really contaminating each person that he would operate in. And so, obviously there are some things that, I think God sort of leaves it up to us to figure out in a way. And so, I do think there are some warning signs that are obviously in place in certain areas, but I think, I do want to say, even talking about this, that I think some warning signs are a little bit harder to actually, see and discover. And that's why, I think when we answer to that is really, keeping the direction that God gives us. When God said to Adam and Eve, hey, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there's no mention that God ever warned them about a talking snake that would probably persuade them to eat that fruit. When you really think about it, there's no at least record of God ever saying, hey, don't listen to a talking snake that, could come up to you and try to persuade you. God just, directly told them what they shouldn't do, which I think, covers, any persuasion from a talking snake or whatnot. But yet, they knew the basics of, hey, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But, still the warning sign of, hey, there's a snake here. And, I think obviously, as we know, snakes sort of look dangerous in a way, but I don't know. I mean, we have no, idea of when Adam and Eve saw a snake, did they sort of naturally know, like, hey, this animal looks sort of dangerous, or it just doesn't look like maybe a dog or, a cow or a sheep, or a bird. This animal looks a little bit different. And I think maybe, I don't know if our mindset in regards to snakes just come from, the built up history of, people getting bitten by snakes and, the poison that comes from them. Or is it something of when we see the snake, without maybe having a prior knowledge of poison or not, when we see the makeup that God, how God made that snake, is it, obvious that it is dangerous? But anyway, so I brought up the whole Adam and Eve story is just to make the point that, it seems like there are certain scenarios where we don't necessarily know, the warning signs in regards to certain dangers. And, it is also a scenario of how I don't think God sort of tells us every single detail about, Earth and, the sort of how everything works. I think some things God definitely leaves up to us to find out, but at the same time, it seems to me that God definitely gives us a general warning in some cases. Obviously Adam and Eve had the warning of don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and so that's a whole conversation in of itself. But anyway, I think what we should do is that I think that one of the solutions is to use caution, definitely, and really think through certain scenarios, and proceed with extreme caution instead of just having a mindset of hey, I know this is dangerous, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Or, hey, I know this is dangerous, but I'm not necessarily going to prepare for, any pushback from it. And I don't know if we can always prepare, I mean, I think especially using maybe the scenario of driving, I think one thing that could, help us is, when we drive, we put on our seatbelt, we, check our surroundings when we drive, but yet we know that it's possible for an accident to happen where we can't necessarily foresee that, scenario happening. And so I think that there are certain things that we have to just use caution for. And, when you think about maybe our spiritual enemies, as far as, the wickedness in heavenly places, it seems to me that the Bible doesn't necessarily give us, every detail that we need to know in regards to, some of these topics. But, the Bible does give us, some specifics about, what we should do in regards to maybe putting on the full armor of God, and, different solutions like, staying in prayer, and, different things that we know, the Bible talks about. But yet, I believe there are certain scenarios that, God doesn't necessarily tell us. And so, anyway, hopefully this was a good reminder. I think that, in certain scenarios, especially I remember a specific event when I was younger that, when I think my dad, but my dad was trying to, get us, my brother and I, to go scuba diving. And I still remember this, I think about it sometimes, in that, he was trying to get us to go scuba diving. And so one of the things, as we were trying to get certified and stuff, there was all these different warnings about, some of the dangers of scuba diving. And so, I kind of had the decision of, no, I don't want to do this, because the risk, seems a little bit too much. And so, obviously there are plenty of people who do scuba dive. And so I think sometimes in certain scenarios, we do have to sort of analyze the risk and, weigh whether we are okay with, the possibility of certain things happening in response to our decision. And I think, especially, if, even atheists sort of had this view towards God where, they could say, obviously the devil is blinding people to, really, this solution. But, if atheists were to say, hey, even though I'm not sure if there's a God or I deny God, we should still proceed with caution. And I don't even see them doing that, even though I don't fully think that, their brain, when I think about how I even came to Christ in a way, I feel like I wasn't necessarily thinking in the way that I think now. And so, I think there, obviously is more to be said, for a person when, in regards to maybe using caution towards God in that little scenario that I gave about, hey, why don't they, think about if there is a God, we should, maybe, proceed with caution type of thing and act accordingly. But, I'm convinced that, when you're without God, I don't even think you really think like that. And, especially with the devil blinding people, to the gospel and different things like that, I don't know if it's really possible for someone to really think like that. But yet, there has to be some level of that, possibility, because, God still holds people accountable, for, their rejection of Christ and their wrongdoing. And so, anyway, I feel like there's so much to kind of talk about in regards to, all the different warning signs that we could come across, in different areas of our life that, I don't think it's always possible really to notice every single warning sign. I know that when I look back on, some poor decisions that I made, as I look back at it, I can sort of see, oh man, that was sort of a warning sign right there. Like when my first decision was to, maybe try some prescription drug that, I had it like NyQuil. I maybe took an extra swig of NyQuil and, sort of got tipsy or something. Well, I should have realized that that was a warning sign to maybe alcoholism or something. But yet, when you look back at certain things, you don't always realize the warning signs. And so one thing to note is that, I love how God gives us grace and mercy, for the things that we don't necessarily realize. Of course, it seems to be a time limit as far as, someone really receiving the grace of God and, the mercy of God. And, it seems like God does hold us accountable for, the knowledge that we do have and the revelation that we do have. But, I love how, God can, wake us up if we come to him. And, I think there's a lot to be said about this topic. And so, hopefully this was helpful to someone. Maybe you can think about what warning signs do you have in regards to different things in your life. Maybe there are some warning signs about maybe temptations that you're getting too close to. Maybe, you are flirting too much or flirting with a coworker, and, you have a warning sign in your life to say, hey, adultery may be around the corner for you if you continue down this path. Maybe you have a warning sign in your life of, if you're watching more and more wrong TV shows, maybe there's a warning of, how porn could possibly be a choice for your future if you don't, shape up with just the little that you are currently compromising on right now. And so, anyway, thanks so much for checking out this video. Hopefully this was helpful to someone, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.